The sledgehammer crashes through the plaster, and dust billows into the afternoon light. The renovation crew expects old wiring, maybe some newspapers from the 50s. What they find instead stops every worker cold, pressed between the wall studs, preserved in the darkness for over 3 decades, hangs a prom dress. Pale pink taffeta, now yellowed and brittle. The corsage still pinned to the bodice has turned to brown husks. But it's what the foreman sees when he shines his flashlight closer that makes him back away and reach for his phone. On the fabric, written in rust-brown letters that could only be one thing, are 4 words. He's still down there. The house is 287 Maple Street in Riverside, Ohio, a modest 2-story colonial that's changed hands 6 times since 1987. The dress belongs to 17-year-old Jennifer Callahan, who walked out of the Riverside High School gymnasium on the night of May 15, 1987, and was never seen again. Her disappearance spawned one of the longest-running missing persons investigations in the county's history. Search parties combed the woods. Divers dragged the reservoir. Her photograph aged artificially on milk cartons and post office walls. But no one thought to look inside the walls of the house where she'd lived her entire life. The discovery raises questions that investigators thought were long buried. Why would Jennifer hide her dress in the wall? What did she mean by down there? And perhaps most chilling of all, if Jennifer put the dress in the wall, why didn't she ever come back for it? This is the story of a girl who vanished on what should have been the best night of her life. And the twisted secret that lay hidden in plain sight for 35 years. If you want to hear stories like this every week, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the truth is always stranger than fiction. Riverside, Ohio, in 1987 was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and people still left their doors unlocked at night. Population, 8,400. 3 churches, 2 bars, 1 high school. The kind of place young people couldn't wait to leave and older folks couldn't imagine leaving. The Callahan family had lived at 287 Maple Street since 1969, when Jennifer's father, Robert, bought the house fresh out of the Army. It was a typical post-war colonial. White siding, black shutters, a small front porch where Jennifer's mother, Margaret, grew geraniums in terracotta pots. The house sat on a 1/4-acre lot with a detached garage out back and a basement that Robert had partially finished himself, installing wood paneling and a drop ceiling. Jennifer was their only child. By all accounts, she was a good kid. B+ student. Member of the yearbook committee. Worked weekends at the town library. She wasn't popular in the way that cheerleaders or athletes were popular, but she had her circle of friends. She liked Stephen King novels and MTV, and she kept a diary that she hid under her mattress, though her mother had found it more than once while changing sheets. The spring of 1987 was unremarkable until it wasn't. Jennifer had been asked to prom by Marcus DeVoe, a senior with a Letterman jacket and a smile that made girls forget their own names. She'd said yes immediately, then spent 2 weeks in a state of disbelief that Marcus DeVoe even knew her name, let alone wanted to take her to prom. Margaret took her daughter to the mall in Canton to shop for a dress. They spent an entire Saturday going from store to store until Jennifer found the one, a pale pink taffeta gown with an off-the-shoulder neckline and a full skirt that rustled when she walked. It cost more than Margaret wanted to spend, but the look on Jennifer's face was worth it. "You look like a princess," Margaret told her in the dressing room, and Jennifer had smiled in a way her mother would replay in her mind for decades. The weeks leading up to prom were filled with typical teenage excitement. Jennifer agonized over her hairstyle, whether to wear heels or flats, what color nail polish would match the dress. She made plans with her friends to take photos at the park before the dance. She seemed happy, genuinely, radiantly happy in a way that made her parents exchange knowing looks across the dinner table. But Margaret would later tell investigators that something changed in the final week before prom. It was subtle, barely noticeable at first. Jennifer became quieter. She spent more time in her room with the door closed. When Margaret asked if everything was okay, Jennifer said she was fine, just tired from end-of-year exams. Robert noticed it too. His daughter had always been a chatterbox at dinner, telling stories about school or asking him questions about his work at the plant. But in those final days, she picked at her food and answered in monosyllables. When he asked if she was excited about prom, she said yes, but her voice carried no conviction. "Teenage mood swings," Robert told his wife. "She's probably just nervous about the dance." On the morning of May 15th, Jennifer came down to breakfast in her pajamas. She'd slept late, unusual for her, since she was typically an early riser. Margaret had made pancakes, Jennifer's favorite, but she only ate half of one. "Big night tonight," Margaret said, trying to sound cheerful. "Are you excited?" Jennifer looked at her mother for a long moment, and Margaret would later swear that her daughter's eyes were filled with something that looked like fear. But then, Jennifer smiled, and the moment passed. "Yeah, Mom," she said. "I'm excited." That afternoon, Jennifer spent hours getting ready. Margaret helped her with her hair, pinning it up in an elaborate style they'd practiced. Jennifer did her own makeup. Too much blush, but Margaret didn't say anything. The dress fit perfectly. The corsage Marcus had sent arrived at 5 o'clock, white roses with baby's breath. Robert took photographs in the living room, Jennifer standing stiffly in her gown, holding the small clutch purse Margaret had lent her. In the photos, Jennifer's smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus arrived at 6:30, right on time, driving his father's Buick. He wore a powder blue tuxedo with a ruffled shirt, peak 1987 fashion, and he shook Robert's hand firmly before offering Jennifer his arm. "Have her home by midnight," Robert said, the standard father line. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. They watched from the porch as the Buick pulled away, Jennifer visible through the passenger window in a cloud of pink taffeta. Margaret waved until the car turned the corner. That was the last time they saw their daughter. Riverside High School's gymnasium had been transformed for prom. The decorating committee had spent a week hanging streamers and balloons, setting up a photo backdrop, arranging rented tables with white tablecloths. The theme was Stairway to Heaven, and someone had constructed a crude set piece of clouds and a glittering staircase that led nowhere. Jennifer and Marcus arrived at the dance around 7:15. Multiple witnesses would later confirm seeing them together throughout the evening. They took photos at the backdrop, Marcus's arm around Jennifer's waist. They sat at a table with 3 other couples, all seniors except Jennifer. They danced to Alone by Heart, to Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship, to I Wanna Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston. But according to Jennifer's friends, something was off. Melissa Torres, Jennifer's best friend since 6th grade, pulled her aside around 8:30 while the boys were getting punch. "Are you okay?" Melissa asked. "You seem weird." "I'm fine," Jennifer said. But Melissa noticed she kept glancing toward the gymnasium doors. "Is Marcus being a jerk?" "No, he's been great." Jennifer squeezed Melissa's hand. I'm fine, promise." Another friend, Katie Simmons, noticed that Jennifer barely danced after 9 o'clock. She and Marcus sat at their table, and Katie observed that they weren't talking much. Marcus seemed confused, kept trying to engage Jennifer in conversation, but she responded with one-word answers while staring at something across the gym. At 9:47 p.m., the time stamped by the DJ's playlist log, Jennifer stood up abruptly. Marcus would later tell police that she'd said she needed air, that the gym was too hot. He offered to go with her, but she said no, she'd be right back. She walked out through the main doors of the gymnasium, past the chaperones, out into the parking lot. She never came back. Marcus waited 15 minutes before he got worried. He checked the bathroom, or rather, had a female chaperone check, but Jennifer wasn't there. He walked through the parking lot, calling her name. Her friends joined the search. By 10:30, they'd notified the principal, who called Jennifer's parents. Robert and Margaret arrived at the school at 10:52 p.m., still wearing the clothes they'd put on to watch their daughter leave for prom. The next 3 hours were a blur of confusion and growing panic. They searched the school, the parking lot, the adjacent streets. They drove the route between the school and their house 3 times, looking for any sign of Jennifer walking home, At 2:15 a.m., with Jennifer missing for over 4 hours, Robert called the police. The Riverside Police Department, understaffed and more accustomed to dealing with drunk and disorderlies than missing persons, initially treated Jennifer's disappearance as a runaway situation. 17-year-old girl, argument with boyfriend, probably just needed to blow off steam. She'd turn up in the morning. But when morning came, Jennifer's bed was still empty. Detective Raymond Hartley caught the case. He was 53, a 20-year veteran of the force, and he'd seen his share of runaways. But something about Jennifer's case bothered him from the start. She'd taken nothing. No clothes, no money, no identification. Her purse was still at the family home, her diary still under her mattress. The only thing missing was Jennifer herself and the pink prom dress she'd been wearing. Hartley interviewed Marcus DeVoe 3 times in the first week. The kid was genuinely distraught. His story, never wavering. Jennifer had been acting strange all evening, quiet and distant. She'd left the dance to get air. He'd assumed she'd be right back. He had no idea where she would have gone. "Did you two have a fight?" Hartley asked. "No, sir. Nothing like that. I really liked her. I was hoping to ask her to go steady after prom." Hartley interviewed Jennifer's friends, her teachers, the other students at prom. No one had seen her after she walked out of the gymnasium. It was as if she'd simply evaporated into the spring night. The investigation expanded. Search parties combed the woods behind the school, the parks, the local reservoir. Divers went into the water. Search dogs followed Jennifer's scent from the school parking lot down Maple Street, then lost it 3 blocks from her house. Margaret and Robert became fixtures on the local news, pleading for information. Margaret held up Jennifer's school photo, her daughter smiling in a blue sweater, braces still on her teeth. "If anyone has seen our daughter, please call," she begged. "We just want her home." Tips flooded in. Jennifer had been seen hitchhiking on Route 45. Jennifer had been spotted at a truck stop near Akron. Jennifer was staying with friends in Cleveland. Every lead turned into a dead end. Robert printed flyers and stapled them to telephone poles. Margaret called hospitals, shelters, the morgue. They hired a private investigator who took their savings and produced nothing. The days became weeks. The weeks became months. The case grew cold. By the time Jennifer's 18th birthday arrived in September, the active investigation had essentially ended. She was entered into the National Missing Persons database. Her photo went up on milk cartons. Her parents never stopped hoping, but hope became a quieter, more desperate thing. Life in the Callahan house became a kind of suspended animation. Margaret kept Jennifer's room exactly as she'd left it, the bed made, the posters on the wall, the diary still under the mattress. Robert stopped talking about his daughter in the past tense, insisting she would come home. But she never did. The years passed with cruel indifference. Robert Callahan died of a heart attack in 1995, 8 years after his daughter's disappearance. Friends said the stress had killed him, that he'd never recovered from losing Jennifer. Margaret stayed in the house alone, maintaining Jennifer's room like a shrine, still hoping for a miracle that never came. In 2003, Margaret was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. By 2005, she could no longer live independently. Jennifer's aunt, Margaret's sister Carol, moved her to a care facility in Canton. The house on Maple Street sat empty for 2 years while the family decided what to do with it. They sold it in 2007 to a young couple expecting their first child. The couple lasted 3 years before divorcing, and the house sold again, and again, and again. Each owner stayed only a few years, citing financial difficulties or job transfers or simple restlessness. The house developed a reputation of sorts, not haunted exactly, but unlucky. A place where happiness didn't stick. Marcus DeVoe, the boy who'd taken Jennifer to prom, left Riverside immediately after graduation. He went to college in Pennsylvania and never came back. Years later, a reporter tracked him down for a retrospective on Jennifer's case. Marcus, by then 43 and married with 3 kids, said he still thought about her. "I've spent my whole life wondering what happened that night," he said. "What I could have done differently. If I'd walked her outside, if I'd insisted on going with her, maybe she'd still be here." Melissa Torres, Jennifer's best friend, became a social worker specializing in missing and exploited children. She told the same reporter that she'd never forgiven herself for not sensing Jennifer was in real trouble that night. "She was trying to tell me something," Melissa said. "I know she was, but I was 17 and stupid and more worried about my own date than my best friend. I think about that moment every single day." Detective Hartley retired in 1999, but never stopped working Jennifer's case unofficially. He kept a file box in his garage, adding to it whenever new information surfaced, which was rarely. Before he died in 2018, he told his daughter that Jennifer Callahan was the only case that had ever truly haunted him. "She didn't run away," he said. "I knew it then, and I know it now. Something happened to that girl. I just could never figure out what." Margaret Callahan died in 2019 without ever learning what happened to her daughter. At her funeral, the priest spoke about faith and the mystery of God's plan, but Carol, Margaret's sister, stood at the graveside and thought only of injustice. Her sister had died with a broken heart, never knowing, never finding peace. The house on Maple Street changed hands one more time in 2020, purchased by a real estate investor named Derek Chen, who planned to flip it. The house had been neglected by the previous owners and needed substantial work. New roof, updated electrical, kitchen renovation. Chen hired a local contractor named Jimmy Walsh and his crew to do the renovation. They started work in April 2022. The house was a maze of outdated design choices: popcorn ceilings, wood paneling, shag carpet. The kitchen had appliances from the 80s. The basement was partially finished with that same wood paneling, water damaged in places. Walsh's crew began systematically gutting the interior, starting with the first floor. On May 3rd, 2022, 35 years and 2 weeks after Jennifer Callahan walked out of her prom, a crew member named Antonio Reyes was demolishing the wall between the kitchen and what had once been a small den. The wall wasn't load-bearing, just a partition that Chen wanted removed to create an open floor plan. Reyes swung his sledgehammer into the drywall, and dust exploded into the air. He'd broken through to the studs when his flashlight caught something that didn't belong, something pink. "Hey, Jimmy," he called. "You gotta see this." Walsh came over, looked into the cavity between the studs, and felt his stomach drop. The dress hung from a wire hanger that had been nailed to the wall framing, even covered in dust and age. It was clearly a formal gown. Taffeta, he thought, though he didn't know much about fabric. The corsage was still pinned to it, the flowers long dead. And there was writing on the dress, across the bodice, in letters that had turned brown with age. "He's still down there." Walsh told his crew to stop working immediately. He called Derek Chen, who told him to call the police. Within an hour, 287 Maple Street was a crime scene again. The Riverside Police Department in 2022 was not the same department that had investigated Jennifer's disappearance in 1987. Almost everyone from that era had retired or died. The institutional memory was thin. But when the dress was discovered, one detective, Sarah Brennan, 32, relatively new to Riverside, took on the case with fresh eyes and modern resources. Brennan was methodical. She pulled the entire original case file from storage, reading through 3 decades of reports, interviews, and dead ends. She contacted the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. She ordered forensic tests on the dress. The coroner confirmed what everyone suspected. The brown letters on the dress were written in blood. Type O positive, Jennifer's blood type, according to her medical records. DNA testing would take weeks, but the preliminary assessment was clear. Jennifer had written the message herself. But what did it mean? He's still down there. Down where? And who was he? Brennan brought in ground-penetrating radar to scan the property. They found anomalies in the backyard near the old garage, but excavation revealed nothing more sinister than an old septic tank that had been abandoned when the city sewer system was installed in the 70s. The house's basement was examined inch by inch. The partially finished section showed no signs of disturbance beyond normal wear and age. The unfinished section, concrete floor, cinder block walls, accessible only through a wooden door, was dusty and cluttered with decades of accumulated junk from various owners, but there was nothing that suggested foul play. Brennan interviewed everyone still alive who'd been connected to the original investigation. Melissa Torres flew in from Seattle, where she now lived. She sat across from Brennan in an interview room and cried as she described that night. She knew something bad was going to happen, Melissa said. I'm sure of it now. The way she kept looking at the doors, like she was expecting someone, or afraid someone would come in. Did she mention anyone who was bothering her? Any unwanted attention? No, that's the thing. Everything seemed normal until about a week before prom. Then she just closed off. Marcus DeVoe was harder to track down, but Brennan eventually reached him by phone. He was living in Oregon, working as an accountant. He sounded tired when he answered Brennan's questions. I've gone over that night 1,000,000 times, he said. I didn't see anyone following us. No one approached her at the dance. She just left and never came back. Did she ever mention her home life? Problems with her parents? Never. She talked about her dad fixing up their basement, her mom's geraniums. It all seemed normal. Good, even. Brennan dug into Robert and Margaret Callahan's backgrounds. Robert had been a Korean War veteran, employed at a rubber plant for 30 years. No criminal record. Margaret had been a homemaker, active in her church. No red flags. By all accounts, they'd been devastated by Jennifer's disappearance. The house's ownership history revealed nothing useful. 6 different owners in 35 years, none with any connection to the Callahans or to Jennifer. No pattern, no common thread. Brennan kept returning to the message. He's still down there. If Jennifer had hidden the dress in the wall, she must have done it the night of prom, which meant she'd come home from the dance, changed out of the dress, written the message in her own blood, and hidden it. Then what? Had she left again? Had someone been waiting for her? The timeline made Brennan's head hurt. Jennifer left the dance at 9:47 p.m. The search dogs had tracked her scent from the school to within 3 blocks of her house, then lost it around 10:15 p.m. Her parents were at the school by 10:52 p.m. That gave Jennifer a window of maybe an hour to get home, hide the dress, and disappear again. But why not just tell someone? Why not call the police? Scream for help? Run to a neighbor? Brennan requested the case files from unsolved crimes in Riverside and surrounding areas from 1985 to 1990, looking for patterns. She found 2 other missing persons cases, both young women, but neither shared significant similarities with Jennifer's case. 3 weeks into the new investigation, the DNA results came back. The blood on the dress was indeed Jennifer's, but forensic analysis revealed something else. Mixed in with Jennifer's blood were trace amounts of a second person's DNA. Male. Unknown. Not in any database. Brennan ordered a complete forensic examination of the basement. Luminol testing revealed small blood traces on the concrete floor in the unfinished section near the base of a wall. Old blood. Very old. They brought in cadaver dogs. On June 8th, 2022, one of the dogs alerted at the cinder block wall in the unfinished basement. Brennan got a warrant to demolish the wall. The demolition began on June 10th under controlled conditions, with forensic specialists and cameras documenting every moment. The cinder block wall was original to the house, built in the 50s when the foundation was laid. Robert Callahan had never finished this section of the basement, leaving it as raw storage space. The crew worked carefully, removing blocks one by one. By mid-afternoon, they'd exposed a cavity behind the wall. Not a formal room, just an access space between the basement wall and the earth beyond, maybe 3 feet wide. And there, in the darkness, they found him. The body was mummified, preserved by the cool, dry conditions behind the wall. Male, adult, fully clothed. He wore polyester pants and a button-down shirt from an era long past. The forensic anthropologist estimated he'd been dead for 40 to 50 years, possibly longer. The remains were transported to the medical examiner's office in Cleveland for full analysis. Meanwhile, Brennan stood in the Callahan basement, trying to make sense of what they'd found. Jennifer's message made horrible sense now. He's still down there. She'd known the body was there. But how? The medical examiner's report took 2 weeks. The body belonged to a white male, aged 35 to 45 at time of death. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull. Time of death: estimated between 1968 and 1972, based on clothing, tissue degradation, and isotope analysis. The Callahans had moved into the house in 1969. Jennifer was born in 1970. Brennan pulled building permits for 287 Maple Street. In 1968, the previous owner, a man named Harold Westcott, had applied for a permit to add a half bath to the basement. The permit showed that work had begun but was never completed or inspected. Harold Westcott had sold the house to Robert Callahan in 1969 and moved to Florida, where he died in 1974. Dental records were useless. The body's teeth were too degraded for comparison, and there were no obvious identifying markers. But DNA extracted from the remains was entered into every available database. On July 1st, 2022, they got a hit. The body belonged to Thomas Westcott, Harold's younger brother. Thomas had been reported missing by his wife in January 1969. He was 38 years old, a traveling salesman who'd supposedly left for a business trip to Cincinnati and never returned. His wife had filed a missing persons report, but the investigation had gone nowhere. Eventually, Thomas was declared legally dead, and his wife remarried. Thomas Westcott had last been seen at his brother Harold's house on Maple Street in January 1969. Harold told police that Thomas had left for his trip as planned. No one had reason to doubt him. Until now. Brennan located Harold Westcott's children. 2 sons, now in their 60s, living in Arizona and Tennessee. They were shocked by the discovery, but not entirely surprised. "Dad was a violent man," one son told Brennan over the phone. "Our mom left him because of it. We were young, but I remember the fights. And I remember Uncle Tommy coming around, trying to get Dad to get help, to stop drinking." The theory assembled itself like a puzzle. Harold and Thomas had argued, probably about Harold's drinking or violence. The argument had escalated. Harold had killed his brother, accidentally or intentionally, and hidden the body in the basement during the renovation, sealing it behind the cinder block wall. He'd then sold the house and fled to Florida. But what did any of this have to do with Jennifer? Brennan returned to the original case file, reading with new context. And there, buried in witness statements, she found something that had been overlooked in 1987. Margaret Callahan had told Detective Hartley that Jennifer had been having nightmares for several weeks before prom. "She said she dreamed about the basement," Margaret had said, "about someone trapped down there. I told her it was just stress from school." Brennan also found notes from an interview with Jennifer's guidance counselor. Jennifer had asked to speak with her 2 weeks before prom, seemed agitated, wanted to talk about old houses and bad history. The counselor had thought she was researching a school project. A picture emerged. Somehow, Jennifer had discovered or learned about the body in the basement. Perhaps she'd found something while doing laundry or looking for storage space. Perhaps she'd seen something that made her investigate further. However it happened, she'd known the terrible secret her childhood home contained, and it had terrified her. The final pieces came together slowly, through painstaking investigation and a few lucky breaks. Brennan found Jennifer's diary, still in the evidence locker from 1987. The last entries were from the week before prom. They were disturbing to read. May 7th, I heard it again last night, scratching from behind the walls. Mom says it's mice, but it's not mice. It sounds like fingernails. May 10th, I went down to the basement while Dad was at work. I pressed my ear against the unfinished wall. I swear I heard breathing. How can that be? Am I going crazy? May 13th, I found it. Oh God, I found it. There's a loose block near the floor. I looked inside with a flashlight. I can't write it. I can't tell anyone. Who would believe me? What if Dad knows? What if he did this? I don't know what to do. May 14th. Tomorrow is prom. I'm supposed to be excited, but all I can think about is what's in the wall. I have to tell someone, but what if I'm wrong? What if it's nothing? What if I destroy Dad's life for nothing? I'm so scared. The diary ended there. Brennan theorized, and the evidence supported, that Jennifer had indeed discovered the body behind the wall. She'd told no one, paralyzed by fear and confusion. Perhaps she'd convinced herself it was her imagination, that she couldn't have really seen what she saw. But on prom night, the weight of the secret became too much. After leaving the dance, Jennifer had walked home. She'd let herself in through the unlocked front door. The house was empty, her parents still at the school searching for her. She'd gone to her room, taken off the dress, and in a moment of desperate clarity, wrote the message in her own blood, a warning to whoever might find it someday. He's still down there. Then she'd hidden the dress in the wall between the kitchen and den, a space she knew existed because she'd watched her father do repairs there years earlier. What happened next would never be fully known. The most likely scenario, according to Brennan's analysis, Jennifer had planned to run away. She'd been too afraid to tell anyone about the body, too afraid of what it might mean about her father, too overwhelmed by the horror of living above a corpse. She'd intended to leave town, start over somewhere else, send a letter, or make a call once she was safe. She'd changed into regular clothes. She'd probably packed a small bag. And then she'd left the house again, sometime around 10:30 p.m., heading for the bus station in Canton, or planning to hitchhike. But Jennifer Callahan never made it wherever she was going. Her trail went cold 3 blocks from her house, exactly where the search dogs had lost her scent. Brennan re-interviewed residents who'd lived on that street in 1987. One elderly woman, now 93 and living in a nursing home, remembered something. There was a car that night, she said. A dark car, parked on the street. I remember because it was unusual. Nobody parked there at night. I looked out my window when I heard a door slam. I saw a girl get into the car. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Did you see who was driving? No, it was dark. The car drove away. Whether Jennifer got into that car willingly or was taken, whether the driver was someone she knew or a stranger, whether she's still alive somewhere or met a tragic end that night, these questions remain unanswered. The case is still open. Jennifer Callahan's remains have never been found. She would be 52 years old now. But the discovery of Thomas Westcott's body brought at least partial closure to his family. He was given a proper burial in July 2022, 53 years after his death. His name was cleared from the missing persons registry. The house on Maple Street was demolished in August 2022. Derek Chen decided the property's history made it impossible to sell. The lot remains empty today, overtaken by weeds, a small memorial plaque the only indication of what once stood there. Sometimes the mysteries we inherit are bigger than we know. Jennifer Callahan was just 17, a girl getting ready for prom, when she stumbled onto a secret that destroyed her life. She tried to leave a message, a breadcrumb trail for someone to follow. It took 35 years, but someone finally did. The truth, when it finally surfaces, doesn't always bring comfort. But it brings something else, a reminder that secrets don't stay buried forever, and that even the smallest voice can echo through decades if someone is willing to listen.